Hey, welcome everybody to CSL Palm Desert. My name is Jeff Harrison. I'm just very honored to be here with a group of 6 sensational people that are leading the way for the next generation of ministers in the CSL congregation, or CSL group. And before we get started, though, I want to take just a minute and have everybody just kind of introduce themselves, give us a little bit of time. Don't get too deep because even Oprah said we've only got 30 minutes, even though this is an hour show. So let's start off, if we don't mind, let's start off with Dale. Dale, if you'll just take a moment and let those watching kind of get to know who you are and what's going on. And then we'll just pass the torch let's go to Cheryl after that.
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Dale Olansky, and I've been at the Center for Spiritual Living in Palm Desert since 2001. And I became a practitioner about 12 and a half years ago. And I've always been with Centers for Spiritual Living in Palm Desert. I've never served at another center, so it truly is my spiritual home. I think about 6 or 7 years ago, I became the lead practitioner at the center, which means I coordinate and lead with Dr. Joe and Dr. Laura and Reverend Charles, our practitioner core. So I'm very involved in your prayer requests and just serving at the center. And a couple of years ago, I heard about a ministerial class being taught by Dr. James Mellon, who's one of my big role models. And Dr. Joe talked to us about joining into his program, and I said, yes, I'm all in. And so I'm excited to be serving you guys at a higher level as we all walk together through this process. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Cheryl. How about you? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here.
I grew up in Texas, or actually all over the place in the military with my dad, and moved to California and was here for quite a while. And then after a separation or divorce, I found the center in 2007, and it was just, it answered all my questions, all the questions I'd had my entire life about what's the nature, what is my part in this, the whole thing. And I just love it. And it was really funny. The other day, I found the original program from when I first went to the center, and it was in October of 2007. And I just, this place has fulfilled my life. It has brought new meaning to it. And I am so full of joy and so happy now in my life. So I really thank the center, and I thank Dr. Joe for starting us on this path, and then Dr. James for continuing it.
I love it. Gail, if you'll bring us up to date who you are and what's going on with you.
Thank you. I'd love to. My name is Gail Morton, and I've been a practitioner at the center for 4 years now. I'm also a CSL trained interfaith chaplain, and I do most of my volunteer work as a chaplain at Eisenhower Medical. And I really came to this teaching through the experiential, and I'm so grateful for that, spending really my entire childhood with a devoted father in nature. So what I'm really passionate about is helping people move from their heads into their hearts, because that's where I began this journey with Science of Mind, and then later on found really all the corners and edges of the puzzle in the Science of Mind teaching. What I love to do, and one of my passions, is working with people that are experiencing change and grief. Feelings are a passion of mine. I think it's so important to recognize feelings. And I look very forward to even expanding this ministry beyond just health, healing, and bringing more joy into our lives. Thank you.
Super. And Laurie Savage.
Well, hello. I've been in this teaching 20 years, since I moved here from Massachusetts, which interestingly enough was kind of the birthplace of New Thought, but there was no New Thought there. I was invited to a Science of Mind church, and the first service I sobbed through the entire thing. I felt home. For the first time, I felt I wasn't alone, because it was everything I already believed and I knew in my heart. And to find my people was just such an amazing experience. So I've been taking classes for the entire 20 years, been a practitioner, I think 4 or 5 years now, 2 out here with CSL Palm Desert. and just loving ministerial training. It's an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful to have these five in class with me and to be in class with them. It's given me such a deep connection here at this church as, you know, my husband and I transitioned from LA to living in the desert.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. Brad, if you'll tell us a little bit about you and
Sure.
how you got here.
Hi, all. My name is Brad Whitaker, and I actually found religious science in our current sanctuary many years ago. My aunt was living just down the street, and she's asked me to come to Christmas Eve service, and I said, well, I wasn't really into that. But I went to Christmas Eve service and the New Year's service, and I didn't get the God stuff, but I love the hugging and the singing, and I was just hooked. So I spent 10 years at a San Jose church and 20 years at an Arizona church and a couple of years in Colorado. And then my parents needed some home assistance, so I wanted to take care of them. And I was so thankful. They live in Indio, just down the street from our center. So from where I first found religious science decades ago, I can take care of them and still participate with this community. I've been a practitioner a little over 20 years and very thankful for that opportunity to serve and lead and teach and love from that capacity as a licensed religious science practitioner.
So we're blessed to have you here. Thank you so much, Brad. Appreciate that. And finally, William, buckle up buttercup, Conway. William?
Well, good morning, everyone. Just like you said, my name is William Conway, and I've been coming to the center for over about 15 years now. I've been a practitioner for some time, and now I'm going to the ministerial school with all my fine classmates. My approach to spirituality, one, I came from Catholicism background, didn't really buy too much into it because how I viewed spirituality was more of a personal view. And being 7 years old, you don't really have the vocabulary to articulate those type of feelings, but there's just something I knew inside of myself that just wasn't resonating. But when I found the Center for Spiritual Living, or the Science of Mind, I really like the marriage of spirituality with science and facts and laws. And that's something that my mind could wrap itself around. And that's why I became a practitioner, and that's why I am becoming a minister. I'm a little bit more down to earth when it comes to spirituality. I don't believe that you have to create a space or a room to go meditate. The only space you need to create and allow open is a space between your ears, and open that up. And that is the only thing you need for your meditation. Meditation, you're only one breath away from doing it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, William. I really appreciate that. Well, let's get into some questions. What do you say, gang? You ready?
Yes.
This is my favorite part. I just love asking questions. So, because I think questions are really kind of the window to our souls, and we get to ask questions and find out a little bit more about you. And so many times, I think, even as a congregant who's been coming to CSL for so long, you know, sometimes we don't get to meet you. So this is an opportunity for us to do that. So with the fact that you are kind of that next level, that next generation of ministers in the CSL congregation, what do you see as changing? You know, how is that different? And, you know, I'd like to start off with Dale. Dale, if you don't mind, what do you see as different, and what kind of an impact do you see your group of ministerial students making once you become a minister?
Well, I think what we're really being taught is the necessity to be able to speak a language that means something to all people, and to kind of get away from the jargon of Science of Mind, even though I love the jargon, but we want to be able to teach our philosophy to a greater audience. And that means we need to modify how we're speaking our spiritual truth. So we're learning how to do that. And I must say, we're all very successful at that. You know, we've got, sometimes this center is called the best kept secret in the desert. And Jeff, you know, I know we've talked about not saying that anymore. We want to be the known philosophy that is changing hearts and changing lives. So I think that's one thing that we're seeing is ours to do. And also this whole expansion of virtual community and connection. I think that we're being very well trained in that as well. We're learning how to do videos. We're learning how to do Zoom, as you see, just because it's something that people connect with. And we want to be relevant. We want to be modern. We want to be present. We want to be able to touch as many people as we can. So I think that's what we're learning to do and what we are doing and will be doing.
Great. Hey, Brad, can you give me an idea what Dale said? What does that look like when it says be relevant, be present? You know, how does that look to you and feel to you?
You know, as a ministerial student and continuing my teaching, I've always tried to have, whenever I've taught a class over the decades, to take whatever the teaching is, whether it's from 150 years ago or 30 years ago, and make it relevant to the students' lives right now. So we may reference Ralph Waldo Emerson or Ernest Holmes, but how can we use that teaching and that principle to help me feel peaceful about the bill I have to pay, or staying at home with my spouse that I really may not have signed up to be 24/7 with? How can I use the tools there and the principles there to understand there's only one life, that life is God, and all of that is always in me. So how can I breathe into that, access that, and utilize that in my breath, in my present moment, and whatever's in front of me?
I love it. Hey, I want to take a second because we've got a lot of questions coming from already the group that are watching, and we want to thank you all for being here and honor you for taking the time this morning. We know some of you still have lives beyond the shelter in place, but for those of you joining us, we really want to say thank you. The first question comes from Confident Legend. I don't know their name, but Confident Legend. It says, how has a pandemic changed the way you are approaching your ministerial mission? And I'll take anybody's thought on that. So how is it changing your ministerial mission, this whole pandemic? Anyone? Yes, Gail.
So I would answer that it's really not changing my approach. It's just heightening my awareness for right now, in this moment, with this pandemic experience, what it is that people are looking for, what it is that they need in the way of support. So this really brings to mind the importance of that connection, that interconnection. How do we connect with people? Sometimes people connect beautifully virtually. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's taking groceries to them or a prescription that they might not be able to go out and get themselves. So it's just looking at, in this moment with what's happening, how do we support people? How do we reach people? And this looks different. We're not attending a service together and connecting together every Sunday. We're not doing that anymore. So how do we do the same thing? Love one another, connect, and support people through a time of tremendous change, and just do it in a different way.
You know, when it comes to when we say pandemic, would you say that there is a personal pandemic happening with people all the time, William? And it's not necessarily this viral pandemic, but we can look at somebody and, you know, William, you can be out there, you know, having the greatest day, and somebody walk up and they're experiencing their own, if you will, their own coronavirus moment. How do you approach those people, and how do you help them get into that moment where saying, hey, God is good all the time?
That's a wonderful question. And it happens to me more often than not, just going to the grocery store and actually seeing congregants coming out of the grocery store, and they just start talking to me. And it's amazing at how fast issues that come up within their lives, they're able to articulate. I think it's just the fact that we're a practitioner, and now that we're being known as becoming ministers, they already feel comfortable opening up themselves to us as a whole. But I absolutely love it, because as they're telling me this in the situation that they may be going through, it's funny, not to use jargon, but you have to. I just see the perfection of who and what they are, knowing that they are God and they are expressing beautifully. And it's really just the fact of reminding them of that fact, that everything has an ebb and flow to it, just like what's happening now. There's an ebb and flow, but like Dr. Joe says, you always see the good rushing in. Anytime there's something that's a trauma, as soon as that happens, you see the good bringing in to fill that cavity that was created by something, like what's going on. And I just love that. And having the tools to be able to articulate that and to help people. And when you've done that and you see their energy and the sparkle in their eye as they walk away, it's like Christmas.
That's great. Thank you, William. Hey, Cheryl, I want to ask you a question. This is from our group. This is the nice character. So it's coming easy at you. It says, what are some of the most profound things you've learned through your training that would be beneficial for us to know?
Okay, that's a good one. I think the most profound thing was I personally adore Troward, and I think the one thing that really changed my life and the way I look at things was that principle is not set on precedent, and that's not exactly the words, but in other words, whatever has occurred in my life prior to this does not reflect who I am. I get to decide. I get to choose what I take with me and what I leave behind. And I think that that's what's changed my life the most, is that, instead of dragging that dead body of the past along with me, I've just let go of that stuff. And it just rewrote my story in a way that looked at it from the beautiful aspect of this teaching, that everything that I've experienced has been part of my growth. And everything that I am now experiencing is part of my growth. And I can either take it and use it in a positive way, or I can just continue to live in that place of suffering. Because suffering is something that is not God ordained. It is something that we choose to live in. We don't have to suffer. Pain will occur, but suffering is optional. And so it's very hard when, you've got to think and look at your mind and where your mind is going at all times, and just try to look at it from a different perspective rather than just staying in that place of pain. And I think that's what the biggest change in my life was, that just letting go of things and looking at things from a different perspective, seeing how I grew and how strong I am now.
Great answer. Great answer. Anybody else have a comment on that, or what they felt like the biggest changes that they learned as they've gone through this ministerial training? Yes, Dale.
Well, for me, our teacher is really strong in dissolving the idea that we're separate from spirit, and that his just focus on that it, because we can get so complicated with, we need to do this, we need to do that, but he says it simply, that we really are all that God is. And to know that and to be in that state is really where our healing is. And I love that he just simplifies that. And for me, I've really leaned into that because we talk about it all the time. And it's allowed me to really grow and expand myself spiritually, and to show up as a leader in a more powerful way.
Hey, Laurie, what about, what's the biggest change that you feel when you go from being a practitioner to a minister? What do you think that biggest change will be for you?
I joked the first time I had to speak at CSL Palm Desert that who knew, as a minister, I'd have to speak. So, as a practitioner, it's a really intimate, more or less one-on-one, unless you're doing the opening prayer. It's intimate as a minister as well, but you're called to just do different things. I mean, getting up and speaking has been, I love it, but it's less and less of a challenge for me. But that's been the biggest change. And also, I think there's a different level of leadership there as well. And this pandemic has really made for some really wonderful conversations in our class about leadership and how do you lead through difficult times like this. And I'd say, I'd like to answer the question William asked William, which was about the pandemic. The only pandemic is not knowing who we are, to go back to Dale as well, that the real pandemic is that we forget who we are, that we don't know that we are everything God is, and that we are all connected, because the second you remember that, everything else falls into place, as Emerson would say.
Well, it's interesting, and is through every one of these live sessions with Dr. Joe and Reverend Charles and whomever's on here, it has not gone without someone asking, well, do you think all this is happening because we've not taken care of the earth? We've been pushy, we've been selfish and things like, it's almost like a payback. And what's your thoughts on that? Anyone?
Let Cheryl answer.
Okay.
Well, I don't see God as a punishing God. And I grew up with a punishing God. That's what the teaching was that I was in. And that is not the case. I mean, it's almost hard to understand, but God is actually kind of impersonal. Whichever direction we take our thoughts is the direction we'll go in. So if you're stuck in this pandemic, I've actually had people say, do you think this is the end of the world? And I'm going, maybe it's the end of the world as we see it now, but I don't see it as the end of the world. And maybe this is just an opportunity to have a major reset, you know, just to step back and start focusing on what really is important in our lives. And when you're in, you know, you're isolated. I'm isolated. I'm a single person, so I am really isolated. But I have spent so much time and seen so much good come out of this. Just wonderful things that people do just out of kindness. And I have actually seen more kindness through this than through anything else. And that's hard to explain when there's so much fear as well associated with this. And my main thing is just I have to admit, I haven't had any fear around this. And I think it's part of the teaching. And it's just that I don't go to that place of fear at all. I just see it as an opportunity for us to experience something that we can reconnect. Maybe it's with our family. Maybe it's with the people, our friends. I mean, I've heard from people I haven't heard from in 30 years. You know, it's just like, but it's just an opportunity for us to really step back and see what's really important is the way I view it. That's all.
Great. Anybody else have a comment on that? No. Dale, there's a question here. Maybe this is, since you're in charge of the practitioners, there's a question about, hey, to become a minister, are these classes, you have to physically be there, or is it available online? How does one become a minister in today's world?
Well, there's different schools of ministry. We're involved, we're going through Emerson Theological Institute. It's a 2-year program. Our teacher is in Studio City, California. So we're 2 hours away. So we can show up physically. But most of us do it online right now. And we do it once a week, 3-hour classes. Because of the pandemic, everybody's online now. Nobody's able to meet in person anymore. But we have our weekly class where we talk about, you know, the world, where we talk about spiritual principle, learn all these great new things and present. And after a 2-year completion, we take a written test, which we're going to take May 9th. And I know we're all ready and we're going to pass successfully. Just need to affirm that for everyone. And then we have an oral panel, and that's been postponed due to the pandemic because the paneling is part of a 4-day retreat that we do together. And we all decided that we want to retain that retreat experience. So we're not going to do online paneling. We're going to wait till we can, maybe at the end of the summer, we're going to be going to a beautiful resort, and we're going to panel and have workshops and give talks. And then we're all going to be licensed ministers. The CSL program, which is Centers for Spiritual Living, they have another program as well for ministers. It's a bit more lengthy. It's about 4 years, 3 to 4 years, depending on how many classes you take. And I think they have a combination of online, plus you have to go down for certain classes. There's a campus down at the Seaside Center for Spiritual Living. But for both programs, you do need to become a practitioner first, and then you can apply for ministerial training.
Great. William, could you tell us a little bit about what it takes to become a practitioner?
You have to go through the classes. I mean, it's almost verbatim what Dale said. To become a minister is actually become a practitioner. And first and foremost, a minister is a practitioner.
Always.
Always. First, you're first a practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
But it's generally about 2 years. There's what they call the 100 series that you go through, and then there's a 200 series. And then that allows you to become and to actually start taking classes for becoming an actual practitioner. And then that is a 2-year process as well. They don't have the numbers anymore, but in the old days, it was the 300 and the 400 series. So ultimately, from the time you start where you go, okay, I want to become a practitioner, to the day that you become an actual practitioner, is a 4 year. So it's definitely a lengthy process, and it's really a wonderful time to buckle up buttercup, for lack of a better word. Okay, that's just the way that's how I let the rubber hit the road, and just get rid of your crap, and see the truth of who and what you are, because all the negative thoughts that you have about yourself are belief systems that you bought into throughout your lifetime, not necessarily your childhood, but throughout the culmination of your entire life, the belief system that you have about yourself. And if it's based upon a negativity, or that you're lacking or you're less than, the truth is you are the expression and God in action. And that's the truth that becoming a practitioner for me has made. And that's why I'm going into ministerial.
Beautiful.
Great answer, William.
Yes.
Well, we have
Kelly's
some
here.
people on here that are just wanted to say hello. I think we just put that in
Kelly.
the panelist.
Kelly is one of our classmates. Hi, Kelly.
Also, it looks like Dr. Joe's on here. He put a picture of him when he was a new minister, and there was more hair on his head than on his face in this picture. So, Dr. Joe, please don't be upset at me. That's a positive comment. Sometimes we just have to rearrange things.
So are you saying that when I become a minister, I'll have more hair if I'm going to reverse of that? Or
Well, what'll happen, Brad, is more hair will come off of your head and onto your face.
Oh God, I hope not.
So I don't want to get too far off here. So if there was one thing about what you've learned over the 2 years that you could share with somebody. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about you personally, that you discovered about yourself that you didn't know before you began this whole journey, because the fact that you have to go through practitioner training, it sounds like it takes a couple of years, and then it's another 2 years to become a minister. In that 4 years, what are the things you discovered? Like Gail said, Cheryl said, hey, I found that I needed to let go of that old person and stop dragging her along, right? What are the things that you did that made a difference? Gail, let's start with you.
So my biggest transition is really starting to live this teaching, to be this teaching, not just to use it. I think when we begin our training, our pre-practitioner and our practitioner courses, a lot of it is in our head. It's an intellectual understanding and pursuit. And the greatest value that I've gained is learning to live this teaching. This teaching is all about being it. We hear quip phrases like thoughts are things, and those are really important first steps in our learning, but it's really not that our thoughts are things. It's really all that we embody. It's our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings, our words, our actions, all of it. It's who we are, and who we are is what we experience. So to really move from that intellectual understanding into living this teaching and being this teaching has made a tremendous personal difference for me in my life, and also in my chaplaincy and in my being a practitioner and a budding minister.
Great. Laurie, how about you? It's what's changed for you? What have you discovered about Laurie that you didn't know before you started this journey?
I would say that the main change is exactly what Gail said. It goes from the intellectual to your heart to who you are. And I think seeing that this is so part of me, it's inseparable. It is how I show up. It is applied in every moment. And it may not be my first, I may have a reaction here and there, but boy, that gap has just closed to where I can say there's hardly any gap, if there is one. That has been just transformative. There's when I think about it, I actually well up and feel so emotional when I tap into seeing who I really am, and then seeing who everybody else is, and looking at, taking that wide angle view of life, knowing that it's all good and it's unfolding perfectly, and that the experience may not be exactly what I would choose, but I choose who I am in it. And that doesn't change. And, as I think it was Dr. Tom that said, we don't step off principle even for special occasions.
Oh, it's Raymond Charles Barker.
Oh, Raymond Charles Barker. Getting that's true, that you get to that point where it's just who you are. And that's an amazing place to be. I highly recommend it.
Great. Dale, how about sharing with us?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm in concert with everybody, what they've said, but for me, it's about identity and the whole journey from practitioner to minister and even beyond that, because nothing stops. Just because we become ministers doesn't mean we stop growing and learning and expanding. This is a lifelong thing, and it is a joy. It is a joyful learning. For me, it was though finding about who I was spiritually, to let go of identifying myself with me growing up as this, being that, career, blah, blah, blah. It really got me in touch with who I am at the essence of my soul. And that is the most liberating identity to get in tune with, because it's who we are. We've all spoken to that. But it's just, I mean, words cannot really articulate what this journey does for you. It's transformative, it's delicious, delightful, ever expanding. And the good news is, from day to day, you're never the same, because you're open to changing. You're open to letting go of those things that limit us, those beliefs that really are not the truth of who we are. And being a practitioner, a minister, or just studying our classes, you don't have to become this. Going to our classes, you'll receive the wisdom and the tools that allow you to have a transformational, beautiful, abundant life.
Great. Let's see. Who else do we have? Brad, did you, or Cheryl?
Sure, I'll answer that.
Okay.
I just got a deep understanding that it's all about consciousness. So, when I first started coming back to church, I got introduced to Dr. Joe, and I'd heard of him for years and saw it. And, he's an amazing teacher and preacher. And still the same one thing he talks about every Sunday, using different languaging, is there's one life, that life is God. So how can I deepen that consciousness and that understanding? So we talk a lot about thoughts create, and our thinking creates our life, but it's having the essence of what you want in your life being inside you. And through the teaching and the classes, even ingrained it even more than how can I read, have my spiritual practice, have my meditation or anything else be so within me. So when then I look across my garden and see a flower, I realize my pain in my body has been gone for 2 days. Or that when I have another breath the next afternoon, oh, I'm not stressed about that bill, because then it's within me and it doesn't even have to be thought about anymore. I mean, we get that I want to be an abundant person, so I think abundance. But I think the energy in back of that is just knowing and breathing and being to the point where you don't even think about it anymore, that you're an abundant, healthy, whole expression of God.
Yeah, I think just if I can piggyback on Brad, and this kind of integrates a lot of what we're saying here, what Gail said as well, is that this is really all about embodiment. We embody spiritual principles. So that's our default. And Dr. Joe talks about that a lot. Make this your default. And then life is so much easier because you automatically are going to principle rather than going to fear or lack or limitation, because you know who you are, you know how the universe works. And so you can just move forward in life with complete wisdom and complete awareness of your power to create the life that you would like to live.
I love it. Well, Cheryl, if you'll jump in there, and then William, if you'll follow up, please.
Well, the thing is too, that going through practitioner training, you have to, in order to have room for all of this to grow within you, you have to get rid of all the other stuff. And so what changed for me the most was basically Reverend Laura bitch slapped victimhood out of me. I mean, that's the way it happened. And it was painful, but it allowed me then to break that pattern and just move forward. And then it's like all of a sudden, once you're out of that place of pain, then everything just starts flowering within you. And you wake up every day full of joy because you don't go back to that place anymore. You don't want to visit there any longer. It's not who you are any longer. You get to decide. That's the coolest thing. You get to decide what your life is going to be.
Well, I have to say that for me, it was right off the bat. The first 4 chapters of The Science of Mind got me hook, line, and sinker. That, with how Dr. Joe taught those first 4 chapters, was just an aha moment for me. It really, it locked in and confirmed the belief system that I had within myself and about my relationship to the universe, or just life at that point, what called the universe, just life, that I inherently knew about myself and about the relationship, that this philosophy just solidified that, and I just had to keep getting deeper and deeper. Not so much to be of service for people outside of myself, but it's for a deeper connection within myself, which, by the way, allows me to have a deeper connection with those around me. The previous question that you had earlier about people coming up to you and relationships, it just allows me to be that much more open and honest with myself and with those people around me, see the divinity in all situations, in all life. And that's just, whew, God loves.
You know, it's easy, you guys, I think, especially for some of you who've been doing this for, 4 to 5 or longer years, that we almost forget when someone comes as a newbie. And I'll just relate it to my side, where I say, Brad, all you gotta do is click that button. All you have to do is hit the refresh button. And to me, that's so like easy. But if they don't even know what refresh means, they don't know what that button is. And we just say, hey, thoughts become form. Or we say, we have to be aware of our thoughts. And people are like going, I don't even know what you mean. How do you respond to that? Anyone? Yep, Dale.
Well, this is the artistry of being a practitioner and a minister, because, and I was just thinking that, I was so right there thinking, yeah, we make it look so easy. Yeah, right there. And this is where we, when we meet with somebody, we meet them where they are. We have to pay attention to their languaging, to their vocabulary, their belief system, so we can come in with whatever piece we believe will land with them. And that takes, it takes really listening to somebody and understanding. And I was thinking, I'm teaching practitioner training right now with Dr. Laura, and we're talking about darkness and lightness today. And I was thinking today, if somebody's in a really dark place and I shine this gigantic flashlight that just has so much light they can't even see because it's so blinding, it reminds me of what we do when we're meeting with people. And that's, we just want a little spark. We want to just make it a comfortable light. And so we do that through our languaging and through whatever spiritual truth we want to unfold and unpack for them, so they can start their entry into this philosophy. But we have to be smart about it, intuitive, and very compassionate and understanding.
That's brilliant. Anybody else want to comment on that? Or yes, William?
Yeah, I'd like to, the crux of the question was, how do we interpret thoughts become things? And again, going back to Dr. Joe, he allowed or showed that everything that you are touching, you're feeling, first was a thought before it was built. And so that is a great analogy on how to take the thoughts become things, where it's like, what do you mean? But when you can show somebody who has no idea what this teaching is about, but yet you can show them, place in their hands something like a coffee cup, as simple as a coffee cup. That coffee cup, or that material that's in your hand, first had to become an idea before it actually became form. And so when you can show that, they can then translate that formula or that truth into spirituality. And I think that that's the catalyst that allows people to improve their lives.
Gail, I think you had something that you wanted to tag onto that.
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback on meeting people where they are, because I think that statement is true for everyone that we meet, not just a brand new person, because this is all about growth. I think we've all indicated that. It's incessant growth. That's the beautiful, exciting thing about it. None of us will ever stop growing. And it's all about growing and growing from the point where we are. So I think what's important for us to remember is that each person is in a very, very different place. And where they are is exactly where they need to be in their journey as they are incessantly growing forward.
That's perfect. Hey, Laurie, a question for you. And this is from the Intrigued Traveler watching us over on the website. The question is there a specific section of Science of Mind that took you from intellectual to heart-centered knowing?
Well, you know, as I said in my introduction, this teaching encapsulates everything I already felt. When I was a kid, I grew up Catholic, but it didn't stick. It was like water off a duck's back, if you will. I kept thinking, they can't have this right. Even though I was a little kid, I was looking at the grown-ups saying, this can't be right. And I had kind of a moment when I was a child where I just felt so connected to everything. And it just stuck. And so when I picked up the Science of Mind text and began reading it, whoa, that just ignited that spark that was already present in me. And I went, oh my God, this is it. This is everything I already knew in my heart. And I loved it immediately. And so I think it was Brad who said the first 4 chapters, if you get that, you got the whole book. You really do. And I think the phrase in the Science of Mind that I go back to over and over again is to throw ourselves into the limitless sea of receptivity, having cut free of all apparent moorings. I love that. I must think of that phrase 3 or 4 times a day. Have I let go of all apparent moorings? Do I know there's no moorings? There's nothing holding me back. And am I willing to just let go into that sea of limitless receptivity and know that I am held by that energy? That would be my favorite phrase for sure. That's my go-to.
Thank you so much. I want to give you a statement, and then I'd love to have your feedback on this. We've heard Dr. Joe say this, and I've used this for years. It said, you know, we have between 50 and 60,000 thoughts a day. And here's where it starts getting disturbing, that about 90 to 95% of those are the same as we had yesterday. And about 80% of those are negative. So how do we start making that shift where thoughts become formed, knowing that it's like that teeter-totter, the overwhelmingness of negative? How do we start changing that? How, you know, if somebody came to you and said, I can't, every time something happens, all I think of is, and it's always the dark side of the moon. How do you start changing that?
I'd love to speak to that. I'd say for me, the key was observation, learning observational skills. Once I had that key, it opened up the application of these principles. So ask yourself good questions. What am I noticing? Well, that was the first question I came to. It made me nuts. I mean, I was like, oh my God, there it is. And I started noticing my thoughts and paying attention and seeing the repetitive patterns, because you cannot change what you don't see. So for me, the key was observation and learning that observational skill so that I could be aware of what was going on, because most of what's happening is happening in our subjective mind, in our subconscious. That's really running the show. Well, how do you know what's going on down there? Well, you know, we would say, look at your effects, look at your life. It's demonstrating perfectly, but another way is to just simply begin to observe, to ask yourself good questions.
I want to mix in a little piece of that, and then Gail, I want you to respond to this. Is a fish doesn't know it's in water. So as we talk about that shift from all those negative thoughts, that fish, that person doesn't realize probably most of the time that they're in that negative pond. So run with that, Gail.
So you're right, Jeff. We don't know that we're running in that negative pond for 2 reasons. Number one, we get into these habitual tendencies with circular thought. And also there's this concept of what we call race consciousness, the consciousness that exists out there really from all time, that is running as a background for all of us all of the time. So it comes back to, number one, being very, very conscious, desiring to be conscious of your thoughts. And also then secondarily, once you're conscious and you know what you're noticing, is being very intentional about not only your thoughts, but being intentional around what am I feeling? Because our feelings are the very best litmus test for what our beliefs are, what really is operating within us. So, and I love the statement, show me a man who is for something and against nothing, and I'll show you the next Jesus Christ. And I love that statement, because we can be for something and not against something. And I think in today's environment, that is such a powerful statement, and such a powerful statement of being intentional with our thoughts, because there's so much going around us that feels negative to us. However, we can be for something. We don't have to be against anything. And that is very, very powerful as to what we embody. Because remember, Jeff, it's not just our thoughts, it's who we are that is creative. That's what moves energy.
Excellent. I want to toss another little thing in there, and Brad, I'd like you to take this and run with it as well. Is as you're talking about this, Gail, it reminded me this morning, I received an email from someone who's very dear to me, and he was giving an update on when things will start to reopen. And they were talking about the festivals. And it looks like now that not just here in the Coachella Valley, but all across the nation, all these large gatherings will be moved to 2021. And we said, well, geez, we've already missed our Super Bowl. Now the fall was an opportunity. Now it's gone. And I looked at it and I said, it reminded me of the story of the little boy who was given the choice of taking a room full of toys or this pile of manure. And he chose the pile of manure. And the scientist running this little test said, well, why did you do that? And he said, because with that much manure, there has to be a pony in there somewhere.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering, is that a mental shift to see, hey, the pandemic that's going on are nothing more than new doors of opportunities?
I think that's a fundamental shift. I always love that story. So there's two things I think with what's going to happen tomorrow. There's ways realizing life is going to be different, period. And how can I give and receive in that new environment, as well as, we don't even know when we're going to die. So to think about what's happening next year, we can plan as well as we can, but how can we do two things, I think, in this experience that I'm getting deeper understanding of? In the moment, today, in the hour, how can I know more peace and abundance and the allness of God expressing right here? And then from that, how can I plan on seeing something in the future differently of, God, this trip I really wanted to do, or someone's missing their grandkids and when can they go see them? We can plan and visualize those future goals, but also how can we, in the moment, I was reading, I think it was Greg Bear teaching about real love, that when a grandmother was with a child and the child was leaving and the child said, hey, Grandma, I don't want you to be sad. And she said, honey, I want to be as happy when you're here as I am when you're not. And I thought that was a great analogy to be so in the moment that if I've attracted something more to me, then I can expand my blessings and feel the gratitude around that, but still in the moment to plan. But it's a whole nother wonderful conversation about how life is going to be different in the future. I mean, how are we going to relate to each other, connect to each other? How much more loving and kind and unique ways of connection. There was a whole list of ways to connect before, and now that whole world has expanded to include the world of how we connect with each other.
Please.
What
Dale?
happened?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We
Oh.
didn't hear you.
Yeah, we didn't hear you. You want me to answer the question?
Yeah, the question about that whole idea of the negative mindset and then shifting, and how does that fish know that it's in the water, and how do you communicate with that person to help them get out of that intellectual to heart-centered?
Well, I agree with what everybody has said so far. I believe the first step definitely is recognition, being the observer of your thoughts, looking at your life, what's not working, what are your attitudes, what are your beliefs? And then after that, for me, it's starting to feed the new thoughts into your consciousness. I think affirmations and prayers are wonderful ways to start shifting that consciousness so that you are you're steeped in the positive thinking rather than the old negative thought patterns. Something I do want to say here, because I think this is just an educational moment. People get really freaked out sometimes when we say your thoughts become things, because they start to think that every single thought they're having is demonstrating in life, and it is not. It would be absolute chaos if that were true. And Dr. Holmes says it's the preponderance of our thoughts that demonstrate, meaning those that have the most power within you, those ones that have the most charge, that you're thinking most of the time. So not every little thought is going to demonstrate. But it's ours to do. We teach everybody that, yes, we help you, we give you tools, but really all this work is an inside job. We must be the observers of our thinking. We are the ones that can change it. And I'll tell you, every single person, you included, Jeff, every single person on this panel is a huge demonstration of changing consciousness. I know I can speak for myself. I used to be very negative, and that's long gone, long gone. So we've all done the work, and now we love to teach that to others, how to do that work, which we all do.
Yes, Cheryl.
Well, one of the aspects of changing and working on looking at your thoughts and stuff is to, first of all, the one word that always comes to mind to me is forgiveness. Is forgiving whatever occurred, whatever brought you to that place, but also forgiving yourself for harboring stuff for so many years and giving it residence in your mind. And sometimes when you just say, I forgive you, to yourself mainly, because it doesn't matter if you forgive someone else to them, it only matters to you. When you forgive them, what you're doing is you're letting go of the pain that you've been carrying around and all of the stuff that you have kept inside of you. And so to me, that is the key. Forgiveness, and then going to a place of gratitude, just grateful for every experience that you've had, no matter how horrible or how awful you think it was, it still brought you to where you are right now in your life. And so you get to choose still.
I love it. Hey, I just want to throw this out here. And again, anyone pick it up and run with it. I remember reading a long time ago, and I always say, most of you that know me, I always say, hey, I'm just a kid from West Texas. We do things real simple. So I read this book, and I love the whole idea of the law of the harvest. And I think about it right now, and I start journaling religiously, or faithfully, I should say, about 10 months ago, but I'd been doing it for several years. And I started writing down then what I wanted. And people ask me, they'll say, well, what do you got going on? You must be kind of slow. And I said, no, I'm just crazy busy. I'm out of control busy. And it's because I started planting it back then. And not to say anything negative to anyone, but how powerful is that law of the harvest? And why should somebody right now, they say, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. And if you didn't do it then, do it today. Mm-hmm. If you'll take that whole idea of the law of the harvest, and just tell me a little bit about what you think about that. William, how about you start us out, if you would, please?
Oh, great. Law of the harvest. Come on, Gail, quit laughing. I see you.
It's Cheryl.
but it's true. But I like the green thumb, but I'm not a farmer. But I do like analogies, and kind of a little spin on that about the law of the harvest. We are the directors of our own life. And Laurie's going to like this. George Lucas, I mean, he was a great director. But the analogy is this. He had the vision. He had the thought of what he wanted to create. But he didn't actually do it. He had stagehands and set directors. Those were the ones that actually built the vision that he had. So that type of an analogy is how you can view and how life does unfold. That we are the directors of our life. We don't actually build it, but God creates the set, the stage upon which we play and we act. And where you were talking about the weight of our thoughts, Dale, that was wonderful. Exactly. Not every single thought becomes something. It's the feeling and the passion behind the thoughts, the recurring thoughts day in and day out. So if you're thinking that the shoe's going to be dropping off, well, guess what? It is. Mine usually drops off about 10:30 at night when I go to bed, because my wife doesn't like shoes in the bed. But that's just her. But again, it's knowing that you are the director of your life. And if you don't like the way that your life is headed now, you have the ability and the tools. And we teach you here at the Center for Spiritual Living how to control and have conscious thoughts, not subconscious, willy-nilly thoughts.
Thank you. Anybody, Laurie, any thought, or Dale? Yep.
Well, if Laurie wants to, did you want to piggyback?
I love that analogy, the law of the harvest. Just don't plant things you don't like. I mean, it's really that simple. I don't plant tomatoes. I don't like tomatoes. And if I plant a tomato, I'm going to get a tomato. And that's, to me, is the simplest analogy for the creative process and how it works. As, the seed, the soil, and the plant. And do not plant things that you do not want to harvest, and do plant things that you do want to harvest. It's that simple.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and that's that, when we come into life and we've got all that programming and life is just kind of creating and we're not conscious of it, what you're talking about, Jeff, is consciously planting a garden, not just letting things grow without our awareness. And what you did is you put your intention, you put your awareness, this is what I want to achieve. And you wrote it down, and maybe you did prayer around it. I'm hoping that we've inspired you. And then the law of mind can do what it does. And I think that's why I think one of the greatest parts of our teaching is teaching us all how to be the gardeners of our lives, and planting the right seeds. And if something's growing in our garden that we don't like, to be able to pull that out and pull the seed that came with it, so we can plant life affirming seeds, which bring an abundant, wonderful life.
I think Gail wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Gail?
I just wanted to address what I heard was the time element, Jeff, that you talked about. So you mentioned that you had really been journaling, and then people were asking you, well, you must not have much going on. No, I have a lot, and that has really blossomed. And I just really want to re-emphasize how that was such an intentional, very conscious and very intentional exercise that you entered into. And we always think about time, and time is expansive. It's not linear. It's all happening at the same time. It's all happening all at once. And what we find is when we become what it is that we desire, going back to that law of being and what we become, we end up living. So have you ever noticed, Jeff, that once you became very intentional with all of your thoughts, not only did you get busier, but things became easier? They kind of, work fell out of the sky, it became easier. So the more that we become what it is we desire, then the quicker things happen and the more we have that experience.
That's excellent. Hey, I know you're not going to believe this, but 59 minutes have elapsed, and it was so fun. And I can't believe it went by so quickly. I want to, first of all, take a special shout out to everybody who joined us over on the website. I hope we answered your questions in some form or fashion. I do want, and if you guys don't mind, if you have an extra couple of minutes, we may go a minute or two over, but I think this is important to answer this question. There's a question that says, how do you console someone whose belief system is totally shattered? I think sometimes we hear these questions and we want to know that it's somebody calling out for a little help. And it's like, well, I'm asking for a friend. Well, what would you tell them? Anyone?
I wouldn't, we don't need to fix them. I think a super easy technique, if you're not a trained counselor, is I hear you. Can you tell me more about what you're feeling? If they don't start crying right away, they'll just be in their own space, and then it'll flow with you from there.
That was a great answer. Yeah, like I was saying too, we meet people where they are, and whatever we hear they're needing from us, that's what we'll give. It doesn't necessarily mean, like Brad said, they want to be all fixed up and have a new belief system right there all ready to go. We just meet them with where they are, and we provide them with whatever we feel is necessary for them to get what they need.
Yes, Cheryl?
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, let's unmute her.
Oh, she's still muted. There you go.
Oh, this is such a personal journey that there's no way that I could ever tell someone what they're supposed to believe or what they're not supposed to believe. All I can do is just show them a path of less resistance, a place that you can just go to and find what you really believe by examining everything that you've been told and everything that society says is the truth, and defining what is actually true to you. And that's what Lao Tzu, my favorite philosopher, says. It's becoming an authentic person, being the same man in public as you are in private. And in order to do that, though, you first have to examine all of your beliefs and make sure that they are matching up with who you are.
Great. Gail, you had one last point on there, and then we'll wrap up today.
Yes, I just wanted to reemphasize the importance of, in the scenario you gave us, Jeff, just listening. Just listening and asking questions that are open questions, because pain needs to be felt and experienced. Pain is a fact in our lives. Suffering, as Cheryl said, is optional. Suffering is creating a story around that pain, which is what we don't want to do. But pain must be expressed. And if in this society, we have been so fast-paced that people have not had the opportunity to be heard. And it's amazing when pain can be expressed, then there is space that is opened for something more.
Beautiful. Thank you. Hey, I just want to say thanks again to everybody who joined us. If you notice at the bottom of the page, there is a donate button. We just really appreciate the Center for Spiritual Living for any support that you give during this time, where our goal is to just give you as much love and support spiritually as we can possibly do that. In fact, we're on the air now. That's right. 7 days a week. At what time, guys? Happy hands?
10.
10 o'clock every day. So you can catch something. Also, the cool thing about this is a recorded version. It'll be on YouTube, and you'll be able to go there if you missed it or you jumped in late. Please join us there. Any last thoughts before we go, gang?
Yes, I've got. If anybody needs any prayer work after watching this, or something that's cracked open in you, please go to our website, cslpalmdesert.org, and there is a tab for practitioners on which you can get a hold of, and they are able and willing to pray with you, to help you get through this, but also to help expand the next best thing that's coming into your life. So I encourage you to go to cslpalmdesert.org, and we have practitioners that are there to lovingly help you out.
On that note, too, we also have a place where you can submit prayer requests, and they go out to our whole team. So you've got that as well. And, you know, we're right now during this time, we're called to what we do best. And so we're here for you guys, whatever you need. Like William said, you can find us on the webpage and get in touch with one of us. Also, I have to do a shout out to our GTC Global Truth Center brothers and sisters. I know Connie was there, Liza was there, Kelly was there. I think Dr. James may have been spying on us as well. But we love you all, and we're so grateful to be on this wonderful journey with you guys.
All right. With that, thank you all very, very much. Have an enormously faithful day. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do. We appreciate that. You already were being asked, hey, will you do this again?
Oh, we'd love to.
Absolutely.
It's like an encore.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
clapping
is.
enough. Well, let's come back out. Okay.
We love it. We love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate that. Please
Thank you, Jackie.
keep the faith.
Thank you,
We are
Jeff.
going
We got
through
it.
this journey. We're not building a condo in it. Okay.
That's right.
All right. Take care,
Thank
gang.
you,
Thank you.
Jeff.
Bye, everybody.
Love you all. Love everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.